Come out with us and play. Love your London. Have a banana. In today's episode of Love Your London, we'll be talking about a historic pub, a defunct shopping centre, an art centre that rose from the ashes, a place where a duke once sowed his royal oats, an important Beatles landmark, and much, much more. But we start near where we left off at episode 3, outside Clapham Junction Station. Hello! Just had a little snack there. Welcome to episode 4 of our little travels around Battersea and Nine Elms. When we talk about Battersea, as I said before, we're referring to the proper geographical boundaries of Battersea, rather than the political constituency, which is quite a lot larger. So we finished off the last episode at Clapham Junction Station, which is just behind us. But here is the Grand, and it is a grand looking building, isn't it? It's grade 2 listed. It opened in 1900 as the new Grand Theatre of Varieties, and it's only recently been rebranded as the Clapham Grand. Now, as I said in the previous episode, this area is not really in Clapham, but it's known as Clapham Junction because they wanted the area to sound a bit posher when they built the station. We're in Battersea. That's why we're doing this net here rather than in our Clapham episodes, which will be coming up in a couple of years, because otherwise we'd be covering this then. So a little bit about the Grand. It started off as a music hall for 3,000 spectators, then a cinema, when it became known from 1950 to 1963 as the Asoldo Cinema. And then, like many of these cinemas, it was then used for bingo until 1979, after which it lay empty for 10 years until 1989, when the Mean Fiddler Group bought it and they started putting on gigs there for a few years. It was then actually bought by J.D. Wetherspoon, who almost turned it into a pub, but they were refused a licence. And since then, it's become a live music venue again, as well as a nightclub. And over the years, quite a few famous acts have played here, such as Madness, Echo and the Bunnymen, The Jam and Oasis, and The Kinks, to name just a few. But we're now just going to go a little bit down the hill. There's a very interesting pub to show you, called The Falcon. Now, in the earlier episodes, we explained why there are places around here called The Falcon. There's another pub actually called The Falcon near Clapham High Street, but that is because of the brook, the Falcon Brook. Falcon Brook, sometimes written one word, sometimes as two, which used to run underneath here. This particular pub actually isn't that old. It's from the late 1800s. However, there has been a pub called The Falcon here since at least 1733. That's as far as the written records go. But it is assumed that the Falcon name was actually here a lot earlier than that. And here's a very, very funny drawing of it from 1801, which is obviously when it was The Falcon, but it wasn't this building. Now, you'll have noticed that sign on your screen. Robert Death, delivering genuine rum, gin, wines, and ordinary on Sundays, tea, coffee and hot rolls, syllabubs and cheesecakes of the highest perception. Oh, and just one other nice detail about this picture. It's called Undertaker's Regaling at Death's Door, Robert Death being the publican's name. And there they all are. And I quite like the fact that in the background you can see an accident with a horse and cart, with the rider being thrown off, possibly becoming the Undertaker's next customer. Now, when this pub was being torn down at the end of the 1800s to make way for this huge thing, someone called J.F.B. wrote a piece in Notes and Queries on the 1st of December 1883. And he's bemoaning something that we also moan about all the time on Love Your London. I'm going to read this to you now because I think it's actually it reflects a lot of the moans that we have as well about the gentrification of pubs and how they're changing. And don't forget, this was written in 1883 in Notes and Queries. This is when the old pub was being torn down to make room for this pub. Its appearance was very picturesque, standing in the hollow at the corner of St John's Hill and Falcon Road. Being the last stage into London on the high road from Portsmouth, many travellers must know it. The old wych elm, with a cupboard made out of its hollow trunk and a door hanging on old-fashioned rusty hinges, was a striking feature. But the landlord would not spare that tree, and it has been grubbed up by the roots. The builder has choked up the well and poured concrete on the sward. a modern gin palace will take the place of the low-pitched old tavern with a cross-beamed tap room and a quaint doorway before which a maypole might have been reared. So now it is actually quite old again as well, which is why it is listed in CAMRA's National Inventory of Historic Pub Interiors. This used to be the longest counter in the whole of Europe. Now it's just the longest counter in England because somewhere in Amsterdam and somewhere in Germany have twice broken the record. So there you go. And just across the road from the Falcon is the famous former shopping centre, Arding and Hobbs, which opened in 1876, though this particular building is from 1910 because the previous one burnt down the year before. It's Grade 2 listed, which is fantastic because it means it'll be here for posterity. It became part of Alders for a while, and then parts of it were sold to TK Maxx and Debenhams. Debenhams left in 2020, much to the consternation and disappointment of the local residents. Now there's quite a lot of refurbishment going on inside, and all done very carefully, what with it being Grade 2 listed. The building's owners, W Real Estate, discovered at the top a barrel roof from probably the 1950s, made of stained glass that had remained completely hidden, and which they cleaned using toothbrushes over several weeks. I hope that will be available to see as a public space sometime in the future. And now, we really do like to share also musical history whenever we can, and if you watch the video for the Human League's 1984 hit Life on Your Own, you'll see the singer Philip Oakley walking around a dystopian deserted London in which he lives in Arding and Hobbs. In fact, in one moment of the video, he's using a generator to put the light back on up there, and that's why it's quite a poignant video. We're now on Lavender Hill. This is not a film studio or anything. These are going to be offices. It's called Lavender Studios, and that sort of ties in quite nicely to the fact that there is in fact a famous film, The Lavender Hill Mob. It's a very funny Ealing comedy based on the street about these bunch of incompetent crooks and trying to smuggle gold done looking like little statues of the Eiffel Tower. I think Alec Guinness is in it, and you can get a copy of that movie if by using our affiliate link. It gives us a little bit of extra money. Doesn't give us very much, to be honest. So if you did want to support us financially, we do have a Patreon account, but you don't have to spend money if you don't want to. You can subscribe to our channel, which is completely free, and hit that notification bell so that then you get a notification whenever we release a new episode, and also if you could share these videos as well and comment to the YouTube, the usual thing, like as well, like's really important. But yes, so Lavender Hill, why is it called Lavender Hill? Well, obviously this used to be a hill full of lavenders, and I did say in episode 1 how important flowers and vegetable growing was to the local Battersea area. I spoke in detail about the Battersea bundles of asparagus, which this area is famous for, as well as its anemones, its Battersea red, and a Battersea cabbage, and also melons and carrots, lots of other things, and lavender. So lavender, this was all lavender fields. There were loads of laundrettes up here as well, because obviously they would be able to, after doing the laundry, there would be a perfect place to hang the washing up and get the nice scent of the lavenders. Now lavender itself, the reason why I had it, obviously it smells nice for perfume, also used as a herbal medicine back in the day, and also it's used to flavour honey. Obviously the bees would then make the honey taste of lavender, so that's why there was so much lavender being grown around here. And while we're on the topic of Lavender Hill, if you're a Kinks fan, and if you are a Kinks fan, you must check out our episode on Muswell Hill, where we visit the boys' original house where they grew up. But the link will be in the YouTube description. But the Kinks released a song called Lavender Hill. It was never actually released as a single, but you can hear it on their 1973 The Great Lost Kinks album. I'm afraid you can't find that album on Amazon, so there's no affiliate link. However, I bet you can find it at the fantastic Music and Video Exchange in Notting Hill Gate, which we'll be visiting in our next series, so don't forget to subscribe. So, we are here on Lavender Gardens. This is quite a hip and happening place now. We've got the Four Thieves at the top of the road, and look at all these cocktail bars just literally around the corner. So yeah, it wasn't that hip and happening that long ago. But one thing that was happening very much was here, number 40, ground floor flat, because this is where Fergie used to live. Not Sir Alex Ferguson, but Fergie, Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson. On your screens, the picture of how it looked roughly at the time that she began dating some people of questionable demeanour. In the mid-80s, and also you'll see now how it looked in 2013 when it went on the market for well over £1 million. That's just for the ground floor flat. God knows, no idea how much it's worth now, although it's just been sold by Hampton, so I could probably find out. And indeed I have found out, and going against every single trend on this street. While it sold in 2014 for exactly £1 million, in 2024 it eventually sold for £970,000, which is a loss of 3%. But when you consider that £1 million in 2014 has the purchasing power of 1.4 million today, in fact the owners made a loss of over 30%, or £430,000 when you account for inflation. Could it have anything to do with this guy, I wonder? Fergie was actually good friends with Princess Diana, and Diana would go to quite a few parties here. Fergie at the time was dating Paddy McNally, the Irish businessman who controlled all of the Formula One advertising back then. And it was eventually Diana who put her in touch with Prince Andrew, as she invited her to a number of events at Windsor, and of course to her wedding to now King Charles. Fergie brought Prince Andrew back here in 1985. Policeman keeping watch outside whenever he was here, and she apparently always made sure to be nice to the policemen so that they would be much more positive about her when going back in the car with Prince Andrew after their little dilly-dallying. Apparently he couldn't believe that she just lived in one tiny room. He'd never seen anything like it before. She paid in 1985 £30 a week for her ground floor flat. £30 a week in 1985 would be £90 a week now. And just to give you a rough idea, if you wanted to rent something like this now, you're talking about £1,000 a week for something like this. That's £1,000 a week for a one-bedroom flat in this area, in this street. So that's and that's when I said £30 in 1985 is £90 in today's money. So it's over 10 times, isn't it? Well over 10 times, 10 point something. It's unbelievable. Now, of all the royals, I must say I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Fergie. I've always quite liked her. She seems a bit more normal. So yeah, this is it. Oh, hello. We're just talking about your famous the person who used to live here. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. Was it there or was it this one?
It was the ground floor.
It was the whole ground floor. It was the ground floor, yeah. And how long have you lived here?
A long time.
Long time.
Yeah, I couldn't afford to buy it around here.
Yeah.
Don't even think about it. They'll have to carry you out feet first.
Was Sarah Ferguson the previous resident, like before you moved in, or was someone?
I'm sorry.
Was Sarah Ferguson the person that was here before you, or was
she was living with a friend.
Living with a friend. That's right.
It wasn't her flat.
She had a small room. Fascinating.
But the history around here is really interesting.
It's really good. We've been walking all up and talking about Arding and Hobbs. We've been talking about the Falcon, which used to have the longest bar in the whole of.
Yeah, I can't believe it is nowadays.
It's not. No, it's the third longest.
Really?
Somewhere in Amsterdam and somewhere in Germany has overtaken it. Yeah.
And I've never been into the Falcon.
No. Now, I really must thank someone called Shireen. I hope I pronounced her name right. Shireen Matherin, or it could be Maturin, but thank you very much. She's from the Battersea Pictures Facebook group. She helped me identify this because I knew what the house looked like, but I didn't know the number, and so I had this old photo, and I went up and down it on Google Street View trying to match the different chimney pots and the different stains in the brick, because all these houses look exactly the same, as you can see, both on this side and on that side. But she managed to spot this wall, which looks just like the other one, and so we managed to locate it. So thank you very much, Shireen. Oh dear, I can't believe the sorry state this is in. I'm not talking about the peeling paint, I'm talking about the graffiti underneath it. Deals, whoever you are, no respect for your fellow artists. This is really tragic, because I only just saw this, I don't know when the Google car last went past here, but it was fairly recently, and it obviously it still is peeling, but it's There's certainly none of that awful graffiti at the bottom. I love graffiti, but not when it affects other arts. But this is called the Tapestry of Life. It's a beautiful mural, as you can see, by Christine Thomas, and it dates from 1983. And it shows Adam and Eve in the centre, but the whole thing is inspired by the greenhouses of Kew Gardens, especially the spiral staircase, which I can't actually make out right now, but it is there somewhere. There's the spiral staircase. I don't know where that is. It's too faint.
On the right.
Have you seen it?
I think it's all faded.
It's all fainted.
It looks like a helix.
And the reason why you can't see it is because she used the wrong paint. She just used ordinary house paint. I really hope somehow that can be fixed. I don't know if she's still around, or maybe someone could try and fix it. That is just outrageous. That's vandalism, which I like graffiti. I like tags as well. I think they're fine, but not when it's over someone else's art. Yeah. Not something really important like that.
But if the art looks like, if it's all faded and chipped and stuff, it's because that's why the other one didn't get graffitied so much, because it was immaculate. I think there's part of that going on too. They know that. Look at it, it's peeling.
I know, but it's historic.
It's not going to be for much longer. You can see the cement showing through.
It's really
mystery made. It needs to be stripped right down and the right paint used.
I know. Anyway,
that lasted that long is quite amazing, actually.
Yeah, wrong paint. Okay, so here we are at the Battersea Art Centre. We're back on Lavender Hill after our little trip to see that mural. Now, in episode 2, we showed you another mural, Battersea in Perspective. I think you'll remember that, and you'll remember seeing John Archer, the very first London Black Mayor, and also the Communist MP for Battersea, Shapoorji Saklatvala. So, this is where he worked, obviously, because this used to be Battersea Town Hall. It was built between 1891 and 1893. And here you can see a wonderful photo that was taken in 1893, probably when it opened, to commemorate it. You'll know this because I've mentioned this quite a few times, so we're just doing Battersea, not the whole Battersea constituency. And the reason why I say that is because Battersea used to be a borough in itself up until the mid-1960s, and that's when it became part of Wandsworth Borough Council. So in the mid-1960s there was no need for a town hall anymore because it was no longer a borough, it was part of Wandsworth, which is why this is now the Battersea Art Centre. It's a fantastic art centre. It became the art centre in 1974. It still looks pretty good, which is a relief because there was a huge fire here in 2015 which destroyed a lot of its structure, but it was all painstakingly restored. This is, after all, a Grade 2 star listed building. But the fire was quite horrendous. "80 firefighters were involved and 12 fire engines." And if we just look behind you here, this looks like it was burnt, I take it.
That's definitely something.
That's probably, I'm not sure, it looks like it was yes, that's why you can see here the damage. Or as you see structurally, it's in a terrible state. This is another very moving photo taken by Mike Urban from Urban 75, showing the moment when the tower collapsed, taking a chunk of the wall with it. And what you're looking at here is what the Grand Hall looked like before the fire. Look at that magnificent ceiling. Well, they've done a pretty good job with the restoration. Here's what the Grand Hall looks like now, courtesy of Fred Howarth and the Battersea Art Centre. It's made of plywood, but also looks absolutely splendid. Yeah, we thought we'd just have a little quick drink at the Battersea Art Centre. So, I've never heard of this. Umbrella London Apple Cider. Apparently it's the only cider brewed in London. He did say it was actually from Battersea, but according to this it's from Holloway. But yeah, 5%, never tried it before, £5.65 for a pint. They'd run out of pints, so in the end we've got a half and a can, which is about the same, I guess. Yeah, so Welcome.
It's before dry.
Let me try the can, see if it's better. Can is better. There you go. Oh, for goodness sake, will you stop that sitting down?
All right. What's your hurry?
Come on, can't be late.
Hello, Flower. You all right?
Okay, well, that fantastic, scintillating bit of acting there. That was a reenactment, an homage, if you want, to the fantastic 1967 movie, A Magical Mystery Tour. And it starts off, obviously, that with Ringo Starr, or Richard Starkey, as he is his real name. In fact, he calls himself Richard, or his aunt Jessica calls him Richard, as they're running up trying to get to the mystery tour. They're late, of course, and so basically, yes, it was filmed just down here. So they started off coming up Theatre Road, and then after that, there's a very little clever switch where in fact it was then filmed as they were coming around the corner, not onto this bus stop here, but they were coming from Acanthus Road. Now there is an Acanthus Road just up there on the left-hand side, but it's not the same Acanthus Road. Back in 1967, a street called Acanthus Road, which is now a housing estate, which you can also see on your screen, that's where the old Acanthus Road used to be. But there's no point really reenacting that scene there, because there's no bus stop and there's no Acanthus Road there anymore. So I thought you may as well you film the scene coming up from Theatre Street, which is where it started, and getting onto the bus stop there. I thought that was quite a nice little homage. We have our own Magical Mystery Tour coming to take you away, so follow us because there's not much left. Chop chop, just got a couple more sights to see before this episode, and this whole series comes to an end. As I was saying earlier, we just come off Lavender Hill. This whole place was a beautiful hill full of lavenders, and the smell of laundry drying, taking in that scent of lavender. Unfortunately, not everything around here smelt so nice, because this was the Beaufoy Acetic Works, where they used to make vinegar, where they used to distill vinegar or brew it. This is the only remains of the Beaufoy legacy, is this name, Beaufoy Road. Otherwise you wouldn't know about it, anything about it. But it was massive. It was this huge big thing in there. It opened in 1812 or 1813, it was here until not that long ago. In fact, it was knocked down to make room housing towards the end of the last millennium. And towards the end, they were just working on packaging and distributing vinegar that had been brewed at Sarson's on Tower Bridge Road. Beaufoy's is a much older company though than 1812. They started business back in 1743, but they were originally at another site. In fact, if you want to see some great pics, check out the Greater London Industrial Archaeology Society. Look up Beaufoys of Lambeth, glias.org.uk. You'll find some amazing stuff. Anyway, on to our last station of the series, which is Queenstown Road, just up there. We are here at Queenstown Road Station, which is a very interesting station, as you can see, especially the fact that it's called Queen's Road Station up the top. We're really close to Battersea Power Station, which we visited in episode 1, and to Battersea Park Station, which is just literally there, just where that bridge is. That's how close we are, and that's why all three stations have an out of station interchange deal, where if it's as long as you're fast when you touch in and touch out, you can travel between the stations and it counts as one journey. Why is it called Queen's Road Station? Basically, that was the name of this street, and it was named after Queen Victoria, so it made sense at the time to call the station Queen's Road when it opened in 1877. But after World War II, they changed the street name to Queenstown Road. But the station continued to be called Queen's Road Station, which of course was really confusing, especially as there's a station called Queen's Road in Peckham, there's one in Walthamstow, and Queensway Underground Station in Bayswater, which is actually where our next series is going to be, used to be called Queen's Road too. So at one point there were 4 Queen's Roads here. Now in 1980 they saw sense and changed the name of the station to Queenstown Road, like the road itself, but they kept the sign. And the reason why I'm really quite surprised, because this building wasn't given this status until 2001. It is now grade 2 listed, but we are very lucky that in those 20 years at the end of the last millennium, they didn't get rid of this fabulous frontage and sign. Anyway, on to the usual facts. It's in Fare Zone 2. There's no step-free access. There's no toilets. But weirdly, there is a toilet for disabled people in wheelchairs. It has 3 platforms, but only 2 of them are in use. And it's on the National Rail. You can get to places like Waterloo, Richmond, Hounslow, and even Staines. The Staines massive. Ali G reference there.
Oh yes.
Anyhow, so this has been quite an adventure, hasn't it? 4 episodes. Sorry, this one's a bit shorter than the others, but just how it worked out. And there's so much. I said 60 pages, 17,200 odd words of research. Thanks again to the Facebook groups. Love Battersea and Battersea Pictures, they've been very helpful. And we're off next to Bayswater. So right into central London. Do please remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell and be our patron maybe. I don't know, it's up to you, but it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. And also like us, and you know what to do now. Share these videos, it all really helps. Comment in the comments below. But that's it from us till we get to Bayswater. So till next time, bye! Yay! Result. Next time on Love Your London, we start our new series in Bayswater, where Jimi Hendrix used to skate, where there used to be a shop where you could buy a pint of fleas, where the Cramps' Poison Ivy bathed in a former king's mistress's bathtub, lots and lots of similar-looking white houses, though one hides a very interesting secret, and much, much more. Till next time. From Acton Town to Wimbledon, from Brixton to Beyond, love your London, have a banana.